Bushy Head, the bewitched warrior, rescues two lost daughters and wins them as wives. The daughters of a woman who was a clan matron and nameholder disappeared. She grieved greatly, but her husband, who was chief of another clan, said nothing. He was a bad man, and was chief because he had lied about his brother Donya Dasi. Now, Donya Dasi had once been a skillful hunter, but his hunting charms had been stolen, and so with his wife, Gawisas, he lived away from the village in a modest home. The mother of the lost daughters, whose children should someday be in the sachemship line for paramount chiefs, offered large rewards for their recovery and continually urged the young men to hunt for the girls, promising them as wives to the successful finder. They were most beautiful young women, and there were many searchers, but when winter came, all returned without news. Now, it happened that Gawisas, the hunter's wife, was boiling corn over the fire in her lodge and thinking very intently about the lost daughters of her sister-in-law. She thought that their father, jealous of them, might have cast a spell over them and hidden them away. While thus thinking, she heard a strange sound outside, a sound so unusual that it alarmed her. Her husband was absent on one of his not always profitable hunts. Soon someone knocked at the door, but Gawisas failing to respond, a strange creature entered, looked into her face, and then advanced to the fire. This being was Bushy Head, a dwarf with an enormous bushy head. Upon its chin was a long white beard that dragged upon the floor. He seemed to be all head. The snow and ice had so caught and frozen in its beard that as he walked it dragged behind him like a log. Bushy Head stood before the fire, reeled up his beard, and thawed out the ice. Gawisas could not speak because she was so frightened, so she sat on her bed. The monster looked at her and then ran his cane into the fire, stirring up the ashes. The sparks flew upward and fell into the soup. Again the being looked at Gawisas, but she only stared blankly back. Grasping a ladle, he filled it with ashes and threw them in the soup, and turning, eyed the frightened woman again, but she did not move or speak. He kept looking at the woman until he had filled the kettle with ashes, and then departed. After his departure, Gawisas recovered in a measure from her fright, and dragging the kettle out of doors, the creature, emptied, whom she had named Sogogo, returned on the next day, and for 6 consecutive days, each time behaving as before, and Gawisas remaining silent to all proceedings. At last, on the 7th day, her husband, Donya Dasi, returned, and she told him of all the strange happenings. "Well, what did you say to him?" he asked, and when she replied, "Nothing," he bade her speak the next time the Sogogo came. "He wants to tell you something," he said, "so ask him what he wishes." Having given this advice, Donya Dasi departed on another hunting excursion, for he had come home empty-handed. He was a chief also, but could not rule, because his wife's uncle was his enemy. Sogogo returned soon afterward, and peered into the face of Gawisas, who could only summon up enough courage to say, "Ah, ah, 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 ah," replied Sogogo, and filled up the kettle with ashes again. The next day passed with the same results, but on the 3rd day, Gawisas tremblingly asked, "What do you wish, Sogogo?" "At last," he answered, "you have spoken. I can only speak as I am spoken to, and hoped, since you would not greet me, you would chide me when I spoiled your soup. Now let me tell you that I know where the chief's daughters are, and have chosen you and your husband as the ones to claim the reward. You are poor, and plenty of shell beads will make you powerful. Now tell your husband, and if he is willing to aid me, bid him hang half the liver and half the lights of every animal he kills upon a low branch of the nearest tree. For a sign that I am telling the truth, let him chop down the big tree before your lodge, and within it will be a bear." Sogogo departed, and when Doña Dasi came back from his hunt, successful this time, he was told the news. He felled the tree as directed by his wife, killed the bear, and hung half the liver and half the lights on the branches on the nearest tree. The wife was cutting some choice pieces of bear meat to cook for the afternoon meal when in walked Sogogo, and greeting Gawussas and her husband, sat down and began talking to the man. He explained his plan for rescuing the lost daughters of the chief. Doña Dasi was to go to the top of a certain mound and seat himself in a large basket which he found there. This basket would rest on Sogogo's head and would bear him to the inside of the mound where the chief's daughters had been hidden. Accordingly, the next day, Doña Dasi seated himself in the large basket which he found on the mound and sank down under the earth. Arrived there, Sogogo lifted the basket from his head and proceeded to instruct Doña Dasi how he must rescue the daughters. "Go to the first lodge on the right-hand side of the trail," he said. "There you will see one of the girls. Tell her you are her rescuer. Bid her sweep the floor as soon as she hears her captor approaching, and continue to sweep until you depart with her. Her captor, who wishes to become her husband, has 7 heads. You must kill the creature in order to gain the girl. He will ask you to drink berry juice with him. Poison will be in your cup, but when he winks, change the cups. Then he will want to fight. When you fight him, use this short, crooked knife, and rushing toward him, thrust it between his 7 heads and cut off the middle one. Instruct the girl to sweep it in the fire so that the flames will burn his eyebrows and lashes. That will destroy his power, and all 7 heads will die. When you have done all this, return to me with the girl, so you may know what to do next." Taking the sharp, bent knife that Sogogo held toward him, Doña Dasi thrust it in his pouch and ran down the trail until he saw a large bark house at the right. Entering it, he saluted the young woman, whom he recognized as the eldest of the chief's stolen daughters. He instructed her, as bidden, and had scarcely finished when the 7-headed man entered, and spying the stranger, he cried, "Quay! Come, let us drink a little strawberry juice." He placed 2 gourd cups on a bench and said, "Now drink." Just as he winked, Doña Dasi transposed the cups, and when the monster lifted the berry juice to his lips and tasted it, he exclaimed, "Ho ho!" meaning his power was lessened. "Come, let us fight now," he cried. "Here are the clubs. Take your choice. How does that fine new one suit you?" "No, I'll take that old one," said Doña Dasi, pointing to a half-decayed stick. "I'll fight you left-handed," he continued. "So ready." The daughter began to sweep and the men to fight. Rushing upon the monster so close that no club could hit him, he thrust his knife between the heads and, with a quick jerk of his arm, cut off the middle one. The girl swept it into the fire, and when the eyelashes and brows had been singed, the swaying body and 6 howling heads crashed to the floor. The girl dropped her broom and followed Doña Dasi as he ran out and down the trail. Sogogo was waiting for them, and after listening to the story of the successful fight, said, "On the left-hand side, the 4th lodge down, is another lodge. Go there and rescue the other daughter. A 7-headed monster is keeping her prisoner. Instruct the girl as the first. The monster will enter and ask you to eat. When he winks, change the spoons, for there is poison in the wood. Then he will challenge you as the first. Chop off his ear with your knife, and when the daughter sweeps it into the fire, the creature will begin to die." Doña Dasi obeyed, and events occurred exactly as Sogogo had predicted. When in the fight, Sogogo had cut off the left ear from the 7-headed man, and the ear had been swept into the fire, all 7 heads began to whine, and the middle one said, "You have plotted to kill me! You have been unfair! The woman has planned it! Oh, you wicked woman! You have been a traitor to me!" "It is untrue!" shouted Doña Dasi. "Your own rule has been to fight all who enter your door, and now you are defeated. Before our fight, you boasted you would grind me in your mortar, and commanded me to do the same with you and feed your body to the birds." "Age, age, age," moaned the monster, and died. "Shall I smash his body?" said Doña Dasi, but the maiden did not know. "Go then," said he, "and ask Sagogo." When she returned, she told him to grind the body to a pulp in the corn mortar and hasten back to Sagogo, who awaited him. Doña Dasi pounded the monster heads and flung the mass to the big crows that already had clustered about the lodge. Running up the trail, with the girl following him, Doña Dasi found Sagogo waiting. The 2 girls and Doña Dasi seated themselves in the basket. Sagogo lifted it upon his head, and in a short time they emerged from the top of the mound and breathed the outside air once again. Sagogo led the 3 to his lodge far back in the forest, where he told all his history, and then bade Doña Dasi run to the lodge of the great chief and tell him to call a great council at which important news would be revealed and presents given. When the chief had listened to Doña Dasi, he asked, "What news can you bring and what presents can you give?" "I have luck now," was the answer. The feast day came, and people flocked from distant villages to hear the news and receive the presents. Doña Dasi arose and said, "I have come to tell our great chief that his daughters have been found and are now safe and near here, and shall be restored on one condition, that he remove his spell from a certain young man whom he has conjured." The chief was greatly angered that any condition should be given, and refused to grant it. Meanwhile, Doña Dasi was arranging long strings of shell beads and piles of skins in piles on the council house floor, one for each person present. "These cannot be distributed until our chief grants my condition," he said. The chief remained stubborn. The people were anxious for their feast and gifts. The chief's wife begged him to consent and regain his lost children. So, fearing the anger of his people and fury of his wife, he at last asked that the young man who rested under the spell be brought to him. Sagogo entered. The chief looked ashamed and then frowned in anger. "Come," he said, and led the way to a small dome-shaped lodge, pushed Sagogo in, and then entered himself. Heating some round stones, he threw a handful of magical herbs upon them, then, taking his rattle, chanted a song. The smoke from the herbs enveloped Sagogo, and when the song ended, he had become a handsome young warrior. The chief and the transformed Sagogo re-entered the council. "Where are the daughters?" shouted the people. Drawing out a red bark box from his pouch, he opened it, and out fell the 2 girls. There was a great shout, and the chief's wife rushed forward and embraced her children. Doña Dasi distributed his presents. Doña Dasi then advanced to the chief, who gave him the reward, but so small was it in comparison with Doña Dasi's liberal gifts that it seemed a mere trifle. The chief soon lost his influence, but Doña Dasi, who had grown rich and successful, succeeded him in the hearts of the people. But Sagogo, the transformed, was happy with his 2 wives, the chief's daughters. He took both. That was all right in those days.